First, I pay my sincere respects to the Master. I myself am already a disciple of Buddhism. There is no need to mention my Dharma name. My department is Continuing Education, the School of Continuing Education. It's not any finance department or any other department. I have two questions. One is about the modern reincarnation of Ananda Rinpoche. Who is it? Because my senior brother, his root guru, is this person. The other is a question my master gave me. What is the ultimate? That's all, just these two.
As for the first question, I don't know Ananda, so I have even less idea about his reincarnation, but I hope to keep searching and learning more in the future. As for the second question, there are many ways to understand what is called ultimate. From the perspective of Buddhist wisdom, the true ultimate is that all phenomena are empty. The principle all phenomena are empty. In fact, even modern physics, including quantum mechanics, has to acknowledge this. Moreover, what they have discovered happens to coincide with what Buddhism taught over 2,500 years ago. The true nature of all phenomena, as discerned by the Buddha's omniscient wisdom and wisdom of suchness, matches perfectly without the slightest discrepancy. So this is also a truly astonishing discovery. Now, scientists believe that Eastern thought was remarkably advanced and are very surprised by this. So I think everyone has different ways of judging the ultimate nature of any phenomenon. Of course, if what you're asking is related to this aspect, I think it's best to understand that the essence of all phenomena is emptiness. But its intrinsic nature is also inherently luminous and radiant. In Buddhism, this is called the inseparability of appearance and emptiness. In the world today, this is also referred to as the fundamental basis of all phenomena, of everything in existence.
Hello, Master. I am a Chinese major from the School of Finance and Media. My question is, how can one completely eliminate or at least significantly reduce self-attachment? Even though I know it's just a wound, it still hurts. My second question is one my friend asked me to bring up. When afflictive emotions arise, even though you know they are afflictions, you still can't detach yourself from them. Sometimes you even get more and more entangled, actually turning it into an even bigger problem. Thank you.
First of all, eliminating self-attachment is not that easy, but it is absolutely necessary to get rid of self-attachment. Right now, for everyone present, if you haven't used wisdom to examine it, the so-called self seems to clearly exist. But when we actually try to observe the self, we originally tend to think that it is our body, but where exactly is the self? Is the self perhaps hidden inside the head, in the heart, or maybe somewhere else entirely? When you carefully investigate, you can never actually find the true master of the self. This isn't just what Buddhism states, even modern medicine says the same thing. Therefore, modern Buddhism provides a detailed analysis of the so-called self. This is called the aggregation of the 5 skandhas: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. For example, when our consciousness and our body come together and interact with each other, we call this combination the self. It's like when we say this is a bottle, but if we really try to find it, where exactly is the so-called bottle? Is it at the bottom, the mouth, inside, or outside the bottle? At this point, we realize that what we call a bottle is just a temporary combination. In this regard, I believe Buddhism is truly exceptional. Whether it's a university professor or a scientist, I've met many scientists who believe that the self exists. And when they say the self exists, I ask them, where exactly are you? They say it's my body, but actually the body is my body, not me. So where exactly are you right now? At this point, some say, I am in the heart, while others say, I am in the mind. Since you claim to exist, in what exact form do you exist? Do you exist as consciousness, or as a physical body, or at the molecular level? At this point, no one really has a clear idea. Therefore, Buddhism speaks of no self. Breaking down no self, we have no self of persons and no self of phenomena. The latter means things like my house, my car, my flowers, and so on. All these so-called possessions of mine are referred to as the self of phenomena. And as for the so-called self, this refers to our attachment to ourselves. In fact, when it comes to the so-called self, we haven't really examined it. If you truly investigate, where exactly is this self? When you look for it, you still can't find the self. Therefore, Buddhism speaks of no self. Of course, this understanding of no self begins with recognition, and after recognizing it, you gradually practice. Through practice, you slowly and gradually eliminate attachment to self. Eliminating attachment to self is a long process. It's not something you can decide to let go of. Suddenly the self disappears. You might understand the non-existence of the self on a theoretical level, but in terms of actual realization, it still takes some time. After gradually practicing, eventually, there is no selfishness left. It's a state of complete realization. In Buddhism, this is considered a very profound and significant state. Now, the second question is about so-called afflictions. Does the process of working to overcome them actually create more afflictions? Actually, that's not the case either. Unless your method for dealing with afflictions is wrong, if your method is wrong, you might end up with even more afflictions. But if your method is correct, we first need to truly recognize our own afflictions. In fact, recognizing afflictions is the same as recognizing self-attachment. There are 6 primary afflictions and 20 subsidiary afflictions. The 6 primary afflictions are greed, anger, ignorance, arrogance, and so on. So each of these afflictions is a form of attachment. For example, when I feel anger, when I experience anger towards someone, if at that moment I use my own wisdom to observe where this anger arises in my mind, is this mind of mine outside or inside? Mother Teresa once said, if I love my enemy, eventually the enemy will become my friend. So this kind of love, really. In fact, for someone with a certain level of realization, anger can immediately turn into love. But for us, it seems that we can never truly feel love for our enemies. Instead, we harbor a kind of hatred toward them. You also need to use your own wisdom to observe the difference between this hatred and love. It turns out it's just a matter of discrimination. When people argue with each other, at that very moment, observe where exactly your affliction is. At this time, you will gradually discover that if your method is truly correct, it will not in any way instead become a cause of pain, suffering, or affliction.
Homage to the Dharma Master. I would like to ask a question. First, my first question is, just now the Dharma Master mentioned that the wisdom of benefiting others is extremely important. We are wondering, how can we truly realize the view that there is no difference between self and others? I have this kind of idea. One is all, and all is one. How can each person realize that we and others and this world are actually one and the same? This is my very first question today. My second question is, I would like to please ask the Dharma Master to talk a bit more about the nature of time. Because we often feel that time is irreversible, a kind of linear time. We talk about the 3 times in Buddhism, past, present, and future. We often live in a big city, and human life is very limited. How can we experience this psychological sense of time so that we don't feel constantly oppressed by the pressure of time in our daily lives? These are my 2 questions. Master, could you please help me answer them? Thank you.
First, regarding the first question, truly understanding that self and others are not separate. This is actually relatively easy, and there are 2 ways to approach it. In Buddhism, we talk about apparent reality and ultimate reality. On the level of apparent reality, it is impossible for self and others to be truly undivided. Everyone has their own position and their own values, and others have theirs. But at this time, we should value others more than ourselves, or prioritize benefiting others. Do not do to others what you do not wish for yourself. This is very important. That is, their position is important, as emphasized in Buddhism. One should use wisdom to benefit all beings. This is mentioned in the Buddhist scripture, the Sutra of Mindfulness of the True Dharma, which teaches us to use wisdom to benefit sentient beings. Within the apparent reality where self and others exist, we should often maintain a mindset of wanting to help others. If you take this very seriously, at first, others may not understand or may not be aware of it. But gradually, over time, this kind of thinking and attitude you have will be praised by society and gain public recognition. In the end, you will also become successful. Although your altruistic efforts may not be noticed right away, you will definitely have a promising future. From the perspective of ultimate reality, self and others are not separate. The self is others and others are the self. This is the concept from the Avatamsaka Sutra. One is many and many are one. This relates to the Buddhist teaching of emptiness. This profound Buddhist concept of emptiness is actually considered a rather advanced spiritual state. At this particular point, the so-called fundamental distinction between self and others no longer truly exists. Then the second issue is the concept of time. In the ultimate reality, as clearly stated in the Diamond Sutra, the past mind cannot be grasped, the present mind cannot be grasped, and the future mind cannot be grasped. It is said that the three times are not real, and the Dharma realm is equal. There is such a teaching. But for now, the past history, present reality, and future dreams all need to exist. They all should have a place. So, from the Buddhist perspective, even though time and space are ultimately considered to be illusory, Einstein also said that our sense of time and space is actually a kind of distorted perception. Indeed, even modern science, when observing, finds that so-called time and space, apart from being concepts, cannot be found to truly exist. But even in this seemingly illusory process, it still brings us certain practical conveniences. Therefore, as a person of wisdom, one should plan for the future when it comes to their own time. One should also have a sense of cherishing the present moment. And for the past, there should be a sense of reflection, I think, in arranging the three times, past, present, and future, even though in the ultimate reality, none of them truly exist. Right now, in this dreamlike, illusory world we live in, we also rely on it to manage and regulate our lives in an orderly way. Otherwise, without the concept of time, the entire world would fall into chaos. So I believe that the concept of time should actually be understood from two perspectives. From the ultimate perspective, time is of a single undivided nature, inseparable from emptiness. But in reality, our concept of time must be accurately recognized and understood.
Khenpo, hello. I am a teacher at this school. In my regular daily interactions with my students, I found that today's college students are under a lot of pressure. For instance, students who are currently preparing to graduate, for example, they wonder whether they should look for a job, continue with graduate studies, or go abroad. At this time, it becomes quite apparent that many students begin to feel very confused about the future. So what I want to ask Khenpo is, why does this confusion arise? How should one face this kind of pressure in our lives, and how should one make choices? Thank you.
It's not just college students. Everyone faces some confusing and sometimes difficult pressures. Actually, I think that even as teachers, when it comes to our own lives and our own future choices, we also experience some confusion. Of course, as college students, it's likely that the confusion is a bit more frequent and more intense. At such times, I believe we should always say that we need to make decisions with wisdom. A wise person doesn't just focus on immediate trivial gains. Instead, they consider things from a long-term perspective. As long as all the necessary conditions are in place for you, for example, if you want to go abroad and all the necessary conditions for going abroad are fully met, then choosing to go abroad at that particular time is a great decision. because some people quickly get married or have other things they need to do right away. And in those cases, they might gain some immediate benefits for the time being. But in the long run, after you go abroad, you might acquire a lot of knowledge. When I went to Hong Kong and other places, I felt that many Chinese students really did learn a lot while they were abroad. Of course, the Guangzhou area opened up relatively early as well. So, for many students, it's especially important to have a mindset that is focused on understanding the world. This is truly very important. If you don't have these kinds of opportunities, then if you have the right conditions in other areas, you might go on to continue your studies toward a master's or a PhD. I often meet students who, for example, ask me about this. And I tell them, unless you have special circumstances, you should try to learn more first. Try to look a bit further, see more of the world. No matter what, it will benefit you. Of course, as for other things, everyone faces all kinds of confusion and pressure in employment and daily life. These are the perplexities of life, certain issues that I have addressed in other books and in Q&A sessions at other universities. I've also answered some of them based on my own imagination.
Master, hello. I have two questions that I would like you to elaborate on. The first is about the idea that the world is equal and that everyone is equal. I'm starting to have some doubts about this, so I'd like to ask you, Master, to explain this phrase. The second question is about Masaru Emoto and his book, The Hidden Messages in Water. I'm a bit confused about this and would like your help in answering it. Thank you.
First, the world is fundamentally equal, and each and every one of us is equal. But our destinies are still unequal because of the karma we create, according to Buddhism, and as I just mentioned. When it comes to our destinies, many of the causes in the past are not exactly the same. If everyone had the same power, social status, wealth, appearance, intelligence, and compassion, if all of these were truly equal, then society wouldn't be so colorful and diverse, with all its unique differences and vibrant variety. So I think that if everyone were truly equal, it's only in a general sense. Some rights and obligations are equal. But in reality, each person's suffering and happiness are not equal. Even among twins, one might be very happy while the other is very miserable. So in this regard, as I mentioned, I firmly believe in the existence of so-called karma from past lives. If we don't use the existence of karma to explain this particular situation, honestly, many of the inequalities in this world, right here and now, including the phenomena we often complain about, would be impossible to answer one by one. Secondly, regarding the message from water, this was actually a Japanese scientist who, after conducting experiments over a long period of time, whether with water or with other plants, including apples and so on, when he praised them with loving words, they would survive for a long time. If we curse them with harsh words, their lifespan will be shortened. Even in appearance, they show negative reactions. This is what we often refer to as a kind of counterforce. The way we treat the world, including people who often lose their temper or frequently feel pain in their hearts. They won't live very long and they age especially quickly. If you are cheerful and very open-minded, when worries and pain arise in your heart, you don't pay attention to them, you don't dwell on them, and you are the kind of person who doesn't like to argue with friends or colleagues. On one hand, your appearance will always be wonderful. In Buddhism, it is said that those who practice patience always have a dignified appearance. So I think through this kind of question about the answer regarding water, it also in particular brings to light some of the forces of good and evil. This is not just a Buddhist perspective, but something that scientists have also discovered through experiments. Goodness is like a gentle medicine. It continually emits a kind of light. Evil, on the other hand, is like poison. It is harmful both to oneself and to others. So I often think that good and evil are just like medicine and poison. No matter how people talk about these two in any context or situation, in reality, they are two different forces, and no one can change the effects they have. In Buddhism, for example, we talk about the 10 virtuous and 10 unvirtuous actions. Although this is a Buddhist way of putting it, in fact, it is a law of nature. I hope that everyone here will take the opportunity in the future to study the profound meaning behind this natural law more deeply.
Hello, Master. I am a student majoring in marketing. I am currently a senior, and I am preparing for graduate school entrance exams. The major I am applying for is philosophy. I have two questions to ask. The first one is, we all agree, and many people agree, with the concept of causality. That is, good deeds are rewarded with good, and evil deeds are met with retribution. But in reality, in this society, very moral people are not necessarily happy. On the contrary, some immoral people seem to live very happily. How should we view and approach this issue? The second question is, I personally feel that all of our troubles, in essence, essentially come from our desires and wishes not being fully satisfied or fulfilled. So we need to keep our desires within a reasonable limit. But how do we determine what that limit is? I've thought about this for a long time, and still haven't found an answer. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Thank you.
The idea that good is rewarded with good and evil is rewarded with evil is something taught in Buddhism. Later on, Marshall Chen Yi also used this term in the past. In fact, this concept of cause and effect, as you just mentioned, sometimes people who do good deeds often don't receive good rewards, and those who do bad things often experience some happiness. But this doesn't mean that good is not rewarded with good or evil is not rewarded with evil, because for those who do positive actions and good deeds in this life, their karmic results have not yet ripened. We're planting crops right now. At this time, it's impossible to reap the harvest immediately after sowing the seeds. Those who are enjoying happiness in this life have done good deeds in the past. Now, in this life, they are enjoying the results. But those who perform good deeds and positive actions in this life may sometimes still experience some misfortune in their lives now. There are two explanations for this misfortune. One explanation is that they may suffer bad consequences in the future. Through some means and favorable conditions, the results can manifest quickly in a short period of time. Another possibility is that he is currently experiencing the effects of karma created in his previous life. Good deeds done today cannot bear fruit today. Therefore, in any cause and effect relationship, the cause and the effect cannot exist simultaneously. If a farmer is planting crops, in reality, it takes a certain process for them to mature. Only after this process can the results be obtained. So regarding this issue, many intellectuals have a misunderstanding about the law of cause and effect regarding good and evil. In fact, if you truly observe carefully, no cause and effect will manifest immediately. For example, if you are studying finance, you may be studying it now, but before you officially start working, it's impossible to... Since you are studying finance, then why are you still a student now and have no money? Isn't it said that people who study finance are very wealthy? The effect cannot be used to measure the cause. This is a very important point. Now, well, the second question. Actually, when it comes to our desires, if there is a standard to restrain them, as explained in Buddhism, it teaches us to be content with less and to minimize our desires as much as possible. A sense of contentment is what truly brings you happiness and joy. This idea is not only taught in Buddhism, but within Buddhism it is said that desire is like drinking salt water. The more you drink, the more your craving grows. I once read that Schopenhauer also said that if your desire for wealth keeps increasing, it's like drinking seawater. The thirst only gradually gets worse. The same goes for fame and other things. He once said something like this. So I think when people become increasingly greedy, you may start to feel more and more empty inside. If you have one house, you want two houses. If you have one car, perhaps you want two cars. Even if you own an entire villa, you still aren't satisfied. You might want 10 or even 100 houses and so on. In this way, our desires are always without limit. So when should we put a stop to them? You need to consider your own basic needs for food and clothing. If your basic needs for daily life and survival are adequately met, that's already enough. In fact, our standard of living shouldn't be set too high. No matter who you are, regardless of your background or status, this is the most fundamental perspective in Buddhism. If you are wealthy, then your standards will keep rising and rising, always going higher. If you don't have money, setting your standards too high is useless anyway. So for anyone, it's best to go with the flow. In Buddhism, there's often this idea, I already have enough, it's sufficient. I'm not as well off as those above me, but I have more than those below me, so it's still okay. If you have this sense of contentment, it brings you relaxation and happiness. Otherwise, you'll always be comparing yourself to others. Some time ago, I went to Germany. In Germany, people don't compare themselves with each other, and I think their lives are very good. If you have a house or a car, that's your personal property. There's no need for others to compare. But for many of us, even when colleagues talk to each other, how much did your car cost? How much is your house worth? Talking about these things every day just adds to the pain and creates a competitive atmosphere of comparison. This kind of competition is irrational. It's an unreasonable form of competition. So what is reasonable competition? It's in our studies and in the improvement of our moral character. Reasonable competition is necessary. People need some competition, but irrational competition just puts pressure on us. I think the best thing in life is to have none of that.
Khenpo, hello. I have two questions. You often talk about the union of wisdom and compassion. Regarding wisdom, since we are now in higher education institutions, many intellectuals often require themselves to be extensively well-read and knowledgeable. Is there a necessary connection between being well-read and wisdom? I've also heard that a pure mind gives rise to wisdom. So is there a relationship between being well-read and having a pure mind? That's the first question. The second question is about compassion. We know that compassion is good and it's relatively easy for us to practice it. But how can we let a broad range of students or people in society know that compassion is beneficial both to themselves and to others? That's a question. So for us in higher education, whether administrators or teachers, how can we let students know that doing good benefits both oneself and others, and that this is a good thing? Those are my two questions. Thank you.
First, regarding wisdom. In fact, wisdom, as many scholars believe, is inseparable from being well-read. In Buddhism, it is said that extensive learning and study are actually the source of wisdom. It's the same in schools, just like everywhere else. If there is no teaching from teachers and no listening from students in schools, then students' professional skills and wisdom cannot be improved in any meaningful way overall. So, except for a very few geniuses, all wise people in the world derive their wisdom from teachers. That is why I always feel an endless sense of gratitude toward every teacher, because even the tiniest bit of wisdom I have in my mind all comes from my teachers. Even now, I still think of those teachers from more than 20 or 30 years ago, whether they taught me in elementary school or middle school. Although I never attended a formal undergraduate university, I have still had many wonderful Buddhist teachers and worldly teachers throughout my life. In fact, their teachings and my extensive learning are truly inseparable. If they had not passed on this knowledge, I could not have gained even a drop of wisdom. So I hope that students will always have a sense of gratitude toward their teachers. Nowadays, in many schools, gratitude education is not done very well. Recently, I have established some schools in Tibetan areas, and I have required them indeed, to hold a gratitude activity every month. Otherwise, if the teachers themselves have not educated well, in the end the students will ignore you too. I have met many teachers before who said, "These students don't pay any attention to me now." I said, "Maybe the students are at fault, but perhaps the teachers didn't teach well then. How can you expect gratitude in the future?" Gratitude toward parents and teachers is very important. Your second question is about compassion. Actually speaking, if we talk about compassion in a broader sense, in Mahayana Buddhism, compassion is directed toward all sentient beings across the world without any boundaries. All living beings are the objects of our compassion and kindness. This might be somewhat hard for some students nowadays to imagine, but I truly believe that at the very least, people should always have a kind and caring heart within them. This kind heart truly should be extended to everyone around us, to every living being. We must truly value and cherish this. If you don't have it, then in the future, when you encounter situations at work involving money, such as bribery, corruption, or various temptations in society, or if we encounter situations where harming others or other living beings benefits ourselves, where we gain an advantage or profit at the expense of others, Then, when people genuinely lack kindness and true compassion in their hearts towards others, their minds may start to waver. This kind of phenomenon is very negative. So, when it comes to values, what do I value most? It is wisdom and compassion. A person should possess both wisdom and compassion. If someone has both compassion and wisdom, then that is a good person. Even if you have wisdom but lack compassion, you might only care about yourself and not about those around you. If you only have compassion but no wisdom, you might not be able to help others, because without wisdom, you would be quite foolish. So I always truly and deeply believe that wisdom and compassion are like a pair of wings. With both of these, we can soar freely in the sky of the human world.
Hello, Khenpo Master. I am very grateful to be here and have the opportunity to listen to your lecture. I often travel, and I have read your books while in Tibet. I've also received some books from colleagues who gave them to me to read. I have read your book, Tales for Transforming Adversity. After reading your book, I found the principles very simple and easy to understand. I have benefited greatly from it, so I am very grateful to you here. Today, a friend brought me here to attend your lecture. I am a jewelry merchant, and in the process of conducting and managing our business activities, we are constantly striving and working diligently to maximize profits in all aspects of our company operations. During this ongoing process, isn't there a contradiction between this and the Buddhist teachings on greed, anger, and ignorance? That's my first question. Secondly, I often visit several temples in my local area, and I have also watched some DVDs that talk about Buddhist rituals and ceremonies. There are significant differences between the rituals of Tibetan Buddhism and those of Han Chinese Buddhism. I think many people describe these differences from various perspectives, and I've heard many explanations from friends, but I am still confused. What is the biggest difference between Tibetan Buddhism and Han Chinese Buddhism? Those are my two questions. Thank you.
The person next to you has been wanting to ask a question. Regarding your first question, as I mentioned earlier, while pursuing personal success, many people may tend to maximize their own interests. But there are two types of situations. One of them is, this could be a kind of greed, such as that which is rejected in Buddhism, because you blindly keep seeking the biggest and the most. If you continue like this, it's very likely that in the end, you'll spend your whole life busy, expanding more and more, and eventually it becomes unmanageable. When you leave this world, much of it, including many of your possessions, is left behind. I have seen many business people who spent 40 or 50 years over the course of their lives making money, but in the end, they can't use it themselves. It all ends up being left to future generations. But when it's left to future generations, Buddhism talks about the 5 families sharing, meaning all kinds of people, including your relatives, friends, and colleagues. Many people may start fighting over your assets. This kind of thing unfortunately happens quite often. There's also another kind of expansion, which is actually for the benefit of the whole society as a whole, for all the employees as well. There's this aspect too. Because society today is quite unique, if you don't have the power of competition, if you always stay in the same state, you might be eliminated by society. So at times like this, you have to keep looking for new paths for yourself and then pursue some profits to help those around you. I think this kind of approach isn't really true greed, because one's survival is actually inseparable from the survival of many others. I've seen many successful entrepreneurs, and on the surface, it may look like they're just expanding for themselves, but in reality, the benefits they gain are actually, in fact, social benefits. Many disadvantaged groups are the ones who receive help, including providing significant employment and assistance to many people, such as helping individuals secure jobs and offering support to those facing challenges in their daily lives. So I think there are two possibilities here that we should consider. If it's purely selfish expansion, that might not be good, and Buddhism also rejects it. But if it benefits others, if you help society while making a profit yourself, then as a person in the world, that's what you should do. The second question, there are also many differences between Tibetan Buddhism and Han Chinese Buddhism, including the lineage of practice and the architecture of their monasteries, the way scriptures are chanted. These are all different. But there is one thing in common. At the beginning, one generates bodhicitta and in the process accumulates merit. In the end, everyone aims to achieve Buddhahood and to liberate countless sentient beings. Tibetan Buddhism is Mahayana Buddhism, and Han Chinese Buddhism is also Mahayana Buddhism. So the main goal of Mahayana Buddhism is to benefit all sentient beings. We must help all sentient beings in the world, regardless of their circumstances. This important principle is consistently advocated by both Tibetan Buddhism and Han Chinese Buddhism. Some temporary differences in outward appearance are not the main points of distinction. For example, Guangdong University of Finance and other finance universities, the content they teach should be the same. It's just that the management style of the schools, including certain aspects of the schools, like at the entrance of your school, it says connecting the world through finance, while other schools may not have that. These are the differences in such aspects. But these differences shouldn't really count as major distinctions. So the purpose is the same, and the content of teaching is the same.
Hello, Master. I am a student majoring in Economic Secretarial Studies in the School of Finance and Communication. The question I want to ask is that I don't have a specific career goal. So many times when my teachers talk to me about this particular issue and ask me what I really want to do in the future, I honestly just don't know what I want to do. But I feel that I will take living a calm and composed life as my requirement for myself and do things that I consider beautiful. But a calm and composed life and my future career actually do not really have any concrete or tangible relationship that I can feel or notice in reality. So a lot of the time I feel confused. Should I set a very clear goal for myself? And then, in terms of my studies, work towards that goal? I tend to read some very specialized books in order to enrich myself professionally instead of reading broadly across various subjects. That's my first question. The second question is, there's a temple near my home. There's a master at the temple, and I often go to see him. He's in his 50s, and I often discuss various issues with him. One day, when I went there, it seemed like someone from his family, perhaps a close relative, had come to visit. They told him with a heavy heart that his father had passed away. It was the first time I saw him cry so sorrowfully. Isn't it said that once you enter a monastery and become a monk, you should have a sense of detachment from the world? Why would he still feel so truly heartbroken? The next day, he told an elder monk that he was homesick. Then he quietly left the temple. He never went back there again after that. I really can't understand why he would have this kind of feeling. His father had already passed away. He should have been able to continue his practice without any attachments. Why would he still say he wanted to go back? Thank you.
The first question is about choosing a career and how the knowledge you've learned can help you feel more at ease with that choice. Because you yourself still don't have a very clear direction yet. So it's even harder for me to say, right? But I think, in fact, in many schools nowadays, some people work very hard in life and have a clear objective, but in the end, they don't achieve it. So I used to know a doctor who originally studied medicine. He really wanted to be a doctor, but when he took the exam, he ended up becoming a teacher. He was also very surprised, but there was nothing he could do about it. So for some people, under special circumstances, the field they've really focused on so much ends up being essentially useless when they enter society. But there's just something I really want to remind you of. At all times and in all places, you must maintain a kind attitude. You must have a mindset where you can face others and yourself with a clear conscience. This field of study should be useful to you at any time, and it's extremely valuable. The second question, actually this question should be for that monk. Because if you ask me, I'm not him either. When my father passed away, I didn't cry either, nor did I leave the school, my monastery, the place where I had spent so many years of my life. It was probably in 1995, which should be about 18 years ago now. At that time, my father suddenly died. Actually, I didn't cry at that time, nor did I leave the monastery. But when my guru, my teacher, passed away, I truly did cry, and I was extremely sad. Because the wisdom and guidance he brought to me was even more precious and valuable than what my parents had given me. The guidance he provided was even more meaningful than what I received from my parents. So I think, as for this particular monk, his decision to return involved multiple scenarios. Because some people just shave their heads and go to the monastery, but that doesn't necessarily mean they've truly seen through everything. It's just like among teachers, some university professors may truly live up to the title of professor, but for some, that's not necessarily the case. Their hearts may not be aligned. Even though they have the title, in reality, many do not truly live up to it. In the same way, among Buddhists and in monasteries, although on the surface they may appear to embody that image, in reality they may still be entangled with some of the sufferings of the world and have not let go of various worldly emotions either. We can't assume that just because someone appears a certain way, so their inner wisdom and spiritual level also follow them. But that's not always the case. I think maybe their suffering leaves with them from here, but perhaps in another monastery somewhere they might actually be very happy now. It's hard to say.
Master, good afternoon. I am a student of insurance naturally. In our insurance field, there's a saying, the many for the one for the many. My understanding is that if I help others, then when I encounter difficulties in the future, others will also help me, doing good deeds with this kind of purpose, and when I help others, that's exactly what I'm thinking as well. Does that make it hypocritical? In other words, is it not really the selfless behavior or the altruism that you are talking about? In the end, what I gain is actually a kind of self-serving mindset. And I have a second question. It's about personal religion and faith. We often feel lost, and when we encounter certain problems, we get stuck in them ourselves. Faith can give us a kind of cleansing of the soul, I suppose. Does faith also necessarily have to be achieved only through religious belief? And I also want to ask, what can faith bring us? Okay, thank you.
Regarding your first question just now, when we help others, it is actually also a form of altruism. There was a teacher who once said that even though you want to benefit yourself, if you temporarily help others, that's the best trick. What this means is, for example, in school, you might originally want to become famous or have a certain status yourself, but in your actions, you should try your best to do things that benefit others. At a certain point, you will eventually be recognized for it, even if you sometimes harbor a selfish mindset. By consistently taking this altruistic approach, you can achieve significant personal growth and praise from others, or in other words, self-improvement and development. This is a very normal and meaningful path. So for some students here, when you enter society in the future, maybe at first you won't have such a strong sense of altruism, but for your own sake, you should help others. In fact, helping other people is truly valuable to others. By helping others through your words and actions, your behavior, you move others, you move society, and gradually you will also be recognized. Nowadays, many people oftentimes, in general, start out being self-centered. For their own interests, they argue and fight with others. As a result, in the eyes of other people, they fall from grace almost instantly. This does happen. Therefore, I especially feel that, in particular, what he said, even if it's for your own benefit, you should temporarily help others. This is the most supreme key point. I hope you remember this. The second question is about faith and self-interest. Actually, it's fine whether you have faith or not. It's entirely up to you. But our environment has indeed led to many people having no faith. Moreover, people with faith are often considered to have mental problems, and many are rejected by others. I think this is unreasonable, no matter what kind of person it is. Just a couple of days ago, I saw a report that said, nowadays, in fact, 88% of people throughout the world have some form of faith. Notably, especially after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the number of people with faith has increased quite dramatically. One report said that 80% of people in the world, there are various reports and each gives different figures. 10% of people in the world have no religious faith. Among them, in fact, 62% are somehow related to mainland China. There's this viewpoint as well. So people tend to think that not having faith is a perfectly normal mindset, and if someone does have faith, there might be something wrong with them. Especially when it comes to religious faith, a lot of people are even more dismissive. They think it might be superstition, but this kind of thinking, when you look at the world as a whole, take a country like the United States where technology is actually remarkably advanced. Over 95% of people across the entire country have faith. It's the same in countries like Germany and the UK. So nowadays, in most parts of the world, the religions with the most followers are Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. Then there's Buddhism and other religions. So I hope that many people, when it comes to religious faith, it's best not to treat it as superstition. Otherwise, as Shakespeare once said, it's best not to reject what you don't know. Otherwise, the sins you yourself have committed, such as in your life, they would pay the price with their own lives to make amends. Therefore, this is also unreasonable. Everyone must pay attention.
Hello, Khenpo. My question is specifically about the altruistic wisdom that you just mentioned. My understanding of altruistic wisdom is having enough wisdom to do good deeds. However, our wisdom is a process of continuous development. It's like I once saw an example. If you help a butterfly break out of its cocoon, and then when the butterfly can't fly, you realize that with a genuinely kind and caring heart, you did the wrong thing. This can create some negative emotions inside you. Master, how do you view the situation where good intentions lead to bad outcomes? How should we resolve these emotions? Also, when you see some people who are having a difficult time, but you really can't help them even though you have a kind heart, this sense of powerlessness can develop over time as you are exposed to it for longer periods. Sometimes you can even become numb to it. What are your thoughts on this?
I think these two questions are quite similar, so I'll answer them together for you. What I mean is, in the process of helping others, sometimes it's really hard to help others. It's just that our wisdom hasn't matured yet. But actually, altruism is a kind of mindset. If we have an altruistic heart, it doesn't necessarily mean that your wisdom must be very mature or especially lofty. For example, when you were a child, if you had the intention or desire to help others, you could try your best not to harm other children while playing together. In every corner of society, we interact with different groups of people. At these times, if I genuinely have an altruistic heart and act according to my conscience, this is actually a form of altruism. At such times, even if in the process of doing so, other people may not fully understand me, or I might even be wrongly accused myself. Just like nowadays, many people passing by on the street are afraid to help others. If your altruism truly instead becomes a source of slander against you by society, that's possible, but as long as my own conscience is clear and I feel no guilt. So, in terms of the true value of altruism, whether others recognize it or not, as long as I have a clear conscience, my sincere intention to help and support others, to help all living beings, this intention will always shine brightly and steadfastly. In any nation, perhaps there are a few foolish people who do not understand the truth and have other opinions. Aside from that, as long as human society exists, the altruistic heart will never be considered at fault and it will never become corrupted. Therefore, I have always thought that whether it's intellectuals or people from other walks of life, if they lack an altruistic heart and are irresponsible towards society, even if such a person holds an officially recognized position or has a certain status in society, it may not necessarily be beneficial to others. But if he has an altruistic and genuinely caring heart, then even if he doesn't have much social status, the people and the environment around him will still, in most cases, feel a certain warmth.
Master, hello. And hello to all the teachers, students, and staff present here today. I would like to ask the Master about a psychological confusion I am currently facing. Here's the situation. I am a student majoring in finance in the Department of Finance. I just returned from the Zhaoqing campus. Now that I'm back here, I have a very strong feeling inside. I feel that the main campus is more utilitarian than the branch campus. After coming here, I feel that I am surrounded by certain people. When they need something from you, they act friendly and warm. But when you no longer have any real value to them, they turn cold, emotionally distant, and withdrawn. Up to now, I actually have this feeling inside me that there is a tendency toward utilitarianism here. Right now, I really long for a peaceful heart.
I ask for your guidance, Master. Thank you.
In our society, whether it is utilitarianism or not, such as in our daily lives, or any other kind of mentality and behavior, they are all considered to be completely normal. I believe that as we live in this society, in our daily lives, everyone's circumstances and connections are unique and different in various ways. Our ways of living and values each have their own unique characteristics. But the one thing we all have in common is the pursuit of the most noble, pure, and beneficial wisdom in life. When you finally reach and attain such a truly profound state of wisdom, no matter what colors or shapes the world presents, in your eyes it will appear pure, wonderful, and joyful. If our own mindset changes, the world also takes on a different appearance. Therefore, for each of us now, perhaps the most crucial thing is to face such a very complex situation, especially since people nowadays are often very restless at heart and always feel a considerable amount of pressure. But in fact, we don't really have that much pressure. Just go with the flow. Everything should be completely entrusted to fate, ultimately. Otherwise, I see many people who are now in college, many can't get in, and even those who do, the pressure is even greater for them. They feel that, in their view, when it comes time for job assignments, their salary ought to increase, their housing and many other arrangements ought to improve as well. If they themselves don't have a calm and peaceful mindset, they will always see society as something to complain about, and they often do. Even at school, they grumble about others and the whole world. And when they enter any department or company, they also find the boss annoying and the colleagues unpleasant. They're not satisfied with their living conditions, the food isn't good, the clothes aren't good either, the distribution is unfair, there's resentment about everything every day. In my opinion, people in society shouldn't constantly live in a state of resentment, pain, and suffering. No matter what, as Buddhism says, it's due to your own merit and the karma from your past lives, plus all kinds of present causes and conditions that have created the world you experience now. So this world is, no matter how much suffering or happiness you truly go through or experience, it ultimately becomes your world. When it becomes your world, you should willingly enjoy it. For example, I am a student at this school. When I am a student, I have this good fortune, and I face it with genuine joy. When I am a teacher here, I feel that this environment is, for me, a truly happy and deeply satisfying one. So whether I go to other places to give lectures, or perhaps wherever I go, I have no complaints about this place or any other place. I feel this is my good fortune. It's a fascinating world that appears right before my very eyes. I should thoughtfully shift my perspective and attitude toward this world. In this way, I might live more happily, more joyfully, and with greater ease and freedom.
All right, Khenpo, please have a seat. I want to say that I feel quite deeply about this, and it is something that matters a lot to me. Let me take a couple of minutes to share my thoughts with you and see if my understanding is correct. Khenpo, as I speak, if you think what I say is right, please nod your head to let me know you agree. If not, please shake your head so I can understand your perspective. If you both nod and shake your head, then I'll just go back and think it over slowly. That's how it is. I think this is truly a very wonderful teaching indeed. In Buddhist terms, it's called a teaching or a discourse. But I think, for one thing, I remember it was at Shanto University, Khenpo once said something. The mind is the root of happiness. We often have this kind of confusion, including many senior executives at banks. Just now, there was a jeweler here as well, and he also has these confusions. When we have made a lot of money, often as a result of our ongoing pursuit of material things and wealth, we sometimes discover that the troubles and difficulties we gain in life are not actually less than the wealth and possessions we acquire. This is something that really confuses people, the idea that the mind is the true root of happiness. It is a question that truly requires us to reflect deeply, sometimes for many years or even decades, to fully understand. This is one important thing to keep in mind. Another thing is, I truly believe that altruism is, in my opinion, the greatest form of wisdom. We may rarely, if ever, take the time to really think about this issue, altruism versus self-interest. When a person becomes just a bit shrewder, a bit more formidable, what we now call wisdom is actually self-serving. But why is altruism considered the greatest wisdom? I believe this statement is absolutely true, not the least bit exaggerated. Altruism is truly the greatest form of wisdom indeed. So I feel that although our time today is short, perhaps we need to leave this for the future to carefully reflect on and slowly grasp the true meaning within it. In this way, it's like a seed, a ray of sunlight, and through this kind of reflection, little by little, we can brighten our lives and illuminate our future. Thank you very much to Khenpo Sodargye for giving us this teaching.